Hi everyone, it's Stu here from 3B, and today I'm going to be talking about my 60-hour adventure with Death Stranding. I finally finished the game last night. Those of you that sort of follow my channel perhaps may have seen just a tiny little video that I put up last night just after I finished it, and it's just a tiny little teeny tiny spoiler that it's the very end of the game, which many would have missed because there's a huge credits scene that goes on for several hours, and there's a whole movie sort of section that you don't have a huge amount to do with, and then there's an enormous standard sort of credits roll that happens, and then there's that video that happens at the end, so you can catch that above probably if you really want to see it. It doesn't give too much away, but it's kind of cute. So my thoughts. When I first started the game, I sort of loved and hated it, and that kind of feel went on throughout the game. I was impressed by its scale, by how they managed to make something that could have been incredibly dull in terms of walking from A to B and the environment being predominantly either snow-capped mountains or rocky terrain. That could have ended up being incredibly dull and very boring. But you combine that with an incredible sort of walking mechanic, and I know that sounds really very odd, and it's one of those things that you can only truly appreciate if you actually play the game. And I feel that if they have a demo of it, I think they would actually sell even more. And it's going to sell millions anyway, but I think a lot of people would would stop their dismissal of the whole sort of it's a walking simulator, it's a UPS simulator, and actually play the game and appreciate the mechanic and how that sort of makes you feel rooted in the game and in the environment in which you're walking. I think that appreciation would increase, and perhaps those that were negative as to that mechanic, as to what they expect it to be, those feelings would probably change when they played it. And that's pretty much the case for me. However, the actual aspect of that mechanic being it's prominent throughout. You do get vehicles that you can drive and so on, but a lot of it is on foot. And as much and as incredible as that is, and how that feels rooted, and it's a real sense of struggle, unlike any other game, it's a real feel of achievement when you get from A to B, because it feels like a real, as though you're really doing it. And I know that sounds really strange for a game, but it's as close as you could possibly get with it being fed to you through a controller. And I think that's an achievement, huge achievement in itself. But it's also one of the game's biggest and sort of key frustrations for me. I did get incredibly frustrated with it, probably too many times. A lot less than what I thought I would at the at the beginning, when I was sort of stumbling and falling over and losing my cargo and this, that, and the other. But it continued throughout, and there are times where you just get so tired of that frustration of falling over, or you're trying to get from A to B, and you're losing your cargo, or you get swept up in, you're trying to cross a river and it's suddenly deeper where you didn't expect it to be, and then the current sweeps you away and all your cargo goes swashing down the river, and you're having to chase after it once you manage to sort of swim ashore somehow. That happened a lot and it's hugely frustrating. The other thing with the BTs is that they're incredibly frustrating too. Even when you have your BB and he's doing his thing on your shoulder and you're being able to see where they are, it is still kind of frustrating and slow and arduous. And the whole sort of battle sequences with the BTs, I find really, because you're in this tar, you find it difficult to maneuver and get out of their way, or even find out where they've gone half the time, because you don't get a lot of idea as to where they are. So there are a good amount of frustrations with the game, but this isn't really a review of the game. I know it sounds like I am, but for me, that the root of the game, the soul of the game, was very much in the story that's being told, and that makes more and more sense as it goes on. And only really in sort of Hideo Kojima sense does it really make sense sort of so much later when you finish the game, that the story is unfolded to you, and a lot of it is kind of pieced together in your mind. You kind of have an idea of, yeah, it is kind of what I thought it would be. And towards the end, there's some real emotional challenges that are thrown at you, and you sort of think, yeah, this, please don't let it be any other way but this. And that's kind of what the story gives to you. You get a feeling that the other thing towards the end, there are so many false endings. There are so many times when I got to the end that I thought was the end, and in fact wasn't, and I had to do a whole other quest, to the other side of the world, the side of the map. Or it just went on and on and on. And even when I saw some credits, I thought, oh, this is the end. And it wasn't. There was another couple of hours to go beyond that. Admittedly, the involvement on my part was kind of limited, but it needed those couple of hours. Maybe it was probably not a couple of hours. It felt like a couple of hours, but it perhaps needed those to tell the story of what Hideo Kojima had in his head that couldn't be told in your involvement in the game, because it would just be too sort of sporadic and long and too confusing. So it needs to be put into a whole, and the only way I think they can do that effectively is to have this sort of huge section at the end that allows you to sort of experience it in a sort of slightly offhand way, but it's still, you're kind of involved in some regards, but very kind of limited. But my fear towards that end, when I realized we were at that point where we were getting this huge sort of enormous reveal of the story, and being told who's doing what and when and so on and why, and I'm not going to tell you what happens, there's a moment where you think, oh God, am I just going to just sit here and listen to all this exposition? And in fact, it's not really like that. You become invested with it because there's still things to do, admittedly quite limited. And there's one final thing you have to do, and it's kind of emotional. There's a real sense of emotion towards the end. And I won't spoil it, really won't spoil it, but it is kind of, it almost brought a tear to my eye, because I was like, how after all of this, how can it just be this? Please don't let it be this. And you have to do this final mission, and it's kind of a bit gut-wrenching. You're thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be doing this. And that, I think, is slightly the master stroke in this game, is that, you're this character who's very offhand, who's emotionally redundant and broken, and learns to grow and adapt and become involved and invested in people, and potentially have a dream of a future beyond this sort of broken figure that he is. And that story, that sort of arc of being this broken man to potentially finding some form of redemption and future, I think is really very well told. Aside from the mechanics of the frustration aspects, you kind of forgive it for what happens in those last few hours. And there's a good amount during the game, of course, that you enjoy and you find frustrating. And there is sort of it does feel a lot of fetch questy, and the BTs get on your tits. But at the end, you sort of think, yeah, it was kind of worth it. And I think that's the best, in terms of a game, I think that's the best feeling that you can get. And the only other game that's done that for me is The Last of Us. And Yeah, pretty much just The Last of Us, where you finished the game and it's been like, yeah, that was an emotional ride, and I'm glad I finished it. I'm glad I persevered. And you really have to persevere with this game. It's a physical, mental struggle at times. There are many times you'll think, oh, fuck it. Let's go and play something else. But my best advice is to stick with it, work your way through it, push yourself through it, because the actual story and what you're being presented with at the very end, or the last couple of hours, makes so much sense. And in Hideo Kojima world, that you sort of realize, yeah, this is worth it. And I think it's possibly one of the best games I've played aside from The Last of Us. And that's a lot, given how frustrated I got with the game, how frustrated I got with the mechanics, and falling over a lot, and how much of a pain in the ass the BTs were. If they made the BTs, that whole section, a little bit, just, I don't know, less frustrating, I don't know. It's difficult. It's one of those divisive games, but I really think, it's, if you're playing it and you're feeling like this isn't for me, it's just getting on my nerves, persevere, stick with it, work your way through it, because trust me, the story, if you invest yourself in the story and pay attention, is so worth it. That towards the end, when you're making that final trip, you're thinking, no, no, surely it can't be this. Please do not let it be this. But it is. Or is it? So those are my thoughts. I've played it for 60 hours. I played it. That's all I've done in my time off in this whole week since I got it last Friday. I've not watched any Netflix, Amazon Prime or TV. That's all I've played. And yeah, it's worth it. Give it a go. So those are my thoughts. Give me a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, consider that. And I'll see you next time. Take very, very good care.